For presenting. All right, next up we have Kathy.
Do you want to do your own, or do you want me to do it?
I can do it. Yeah.
Okay.
That's like animation. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Kathy. I'm a postdoctoral fellow and a research associate at the Center for Science Communication Research over at the University of Oregon. Thank you so much for the invitation to come and talk to you all today. I'm going to be talking about a pilot project of ours that got funding through Aspire called How Do Air Quality Communications Influence Healthy Decisions? So I think many of us know that children are especially vulnerable to health effects from wildfire smoke exposure. And air quality indices, or AQIs, that many of us are familiar with, are used to communicate how clean or how polluted the air is, and often also communicate what kind of actions people can take in order to reduce their risks. Now, there are many ways to visualize this kind of information, and so this was a key question that we wanted to explore with this project. Can some infographics actually be used to increase intentions to adopt smoke protective actions, particularly among parents? And can we do that even when the level of smoke is maybe more at a moderate risk level compared to, let's say, a high risk level? So what we set out to do was collect data about previous wildfire experiences from people, test different AQI infographics and their impacts on people's action intentions, and also use these survey and experimental findings to develop evidence-based infographics to use going forward in order to communicate children's wildfire risks, risk to health. And I do want to quickly acknowledge the wonderful research team that I got to work with on this project. Dan Chapman, my co-PI, is here. He's a fellow research associate at the Center for Science Communication Research, and we worked with some really great experts over at the University of Oregon on this particular project. So what did we do? Well, we developed 12 different infographics, which sounds like a lot. And they varied by different types of information, and I'll show you some examples in a moment. But one of the things that we wanted to test was how does the US-based AQI, so this is a scale that many people are more familiar with here, which goes from 0 to 500, how does that compare to the AQHI, which is actually used in Canada? It's one that goes from 1 to 11 plus. We were also interested, as I mentioned, in comparing how does moderate risk compared to high risk perhaps influence different responses to infographics, and then also the visual type. So this was an example of a gauge visual that we wanted to test. And again, this is probably quite familiar to a lot of you. This is what often shows up in people's smartphone apps. But in this case, it's showing an example of the US AQI. So it's going from 0 to 500, and it's indicating a moderate risk level. We also wanted to test something more like this. This is a little bit more common in Canada, and it's a line visual. So in this case, it's showing the AQHI index going from 1 to 11, and it's indicating a high risk. Compare that to something like a table. So in this case, again, showing the AQHI 1 to 11 at a moderate risk. So this is how we ended up with 12 different infographics, changing up little things here and there. So what did we do? Well, we recruited online participants this past summer, July and August, so really at the height of smoke season on the West Coast, 2,100 in all. And we focused on parents of children age 18 or younger, who lived in Washington, Oregon, California, and British Columbia. And 86% of these parents actually said that their community was impacted by wildfire smoke in previous wildfire seasons. 77% said that wildfire smoke had affected decisions that they had made about having their kids participate in outdoor activities. 63% said that members of their household had experienced previous health impacts from exposure to wildfire smoke. So as you can see, it's a pretty highly exposed group, perhaps unsurprising given where we recruited parents from. The question that many of us were wondering, did infographics actually impact action intentions? Well, our preliminary data does suggest that yes, they did. So when we take a look at the people who saw the line and the gauge visuals compared to those who viewed the table, something that we noticed was that those who viewed the AQHI, their responses, so their action intentions that they reported, were actually much more similar at both the moderate and high risk level compared to those who viewed the AQI. So what this means to us is, well, if the point is to try to motivate parents to take action even at more of that moderate risk level, there might be actually some infographics that are able to do that a little bit more effectively. So what are some next steps? We've got a ton of data to analyze, so we're slowly making our way through that. We are planning to release a report that summarizes some of these main project findings and recommendations in terms of what kind of smoke infographics might be effective. Some other planned analyses we want to dig into is actually taking a look at information-seeking behaviors, what kind of information sources people used here on the West Coast. Also comparing perceived smoke exposure compared to real-time air quality measurements, and taking a look at whether people's health beliefs may play a role in how they might choose to take certain smoke protective behaviors or not. So there are going to be hopefully lots of opportunities going forward for knowledge mobilization and collaboration. I've already had the privilege of talking to Sarah Jones a couple months ago now from the city of Ashland. So hoping to make some connections with more folks in the room to do a little bit more of that going forward. So big thank you to Aspire for funding this project and for inviting me up here today.